In 1880, if you were a laborer in London with a few pennies in your pocket, you weren't paying for a bed. You were paying for a temporary reprieve from gravity. For most Americans, the idea of a bad night's sleep involves a lumpy mattress or a noisy neighbor. But in the heart of the Victorian Empire, sleep was a commercial product sold in degrees of misery. If you didn't have the coin for a room, you faced a choice between leaning over a literal clothesline or climbing into a wooden box that felt uncomfortably like a rehearsal for your own funeral. The reality of the London poor in 1880 was an industrial nightmare. The city was overflowing with thousands of migrants who had no home, no rights, and no place to collapse. This gave rise to the penny sit-up and the two-penny hangover, a sleep ritual so brutal it makes modern homelessness look like a luxury. For 1 penny, a man could sit on a wooden bench in a crowded, unheated hall. The catch? He wasn't allowed to lie down.
He had to sit bolt upright all night. If his head nodded or he slumped over, a monitor would shake him awake. You paid for the right to sit, not the right to rest. But the two-penny hangover is where the true Victorian ingenuity revealed its cruelty. For 2 pence, a person was allowed to sleep standing up, leaning over a thick industrial rope stretched across the room. Picture a line of 20 exhausted men, draped over a rope like damp laundry, their arms hanging limp, their breathing heavy in the soot-choked air. At dawn, the ritual ended with a shock. The owner of the lodging house would simply untie one end of the rope or cut it. 20 men would crash to the floor simultaneously. That was your alarm clock. The rope was gone, your time was up, and the street was waiting. If you were lucky enough to have 4 pennies, you could afford the coffin house. These weren't actual cemeteries, though the visual was hauntingly similar.
For 4 pence, a person received a wooden box, just wide enough for a human body, lined with a thin oilskin mattress and a single, often lice-infested blanket. Rows upon rows of these boxes filled massive warehouses. In the dim light of a flickering gas lamp, these rooms looked like mass graves waiting to be covered.
Why did this happen? It wasn't just poverty, it was a legal trap. London's vagrancy laws were designed to keep people moving. It was illegal to sleep on the streets, but the city offered no public housing. Private lodging house owners realized they could monetize exhaustion. They turned human fatigue into a high-volume, low-margin business. They knew that a man who has worked 16 hours in a tannery or on the docks will pay his last cent just to stop standing. The air in these sleeping wards was its own form of torture. With hundreds of unwashed bodies packed into unventilated rooms, the miasma of 1880 wasn't a medical theory, it was a thick, physical reality. Survivors described the smell as a mix of rotting wool, cheap gin, and stagnant sweat. It was so potent that people often fainted before they could even find their box or their spot on the rope. For an American audience, it's tempting to think this is an exaggeration of a Dickensian novel.
But the records of the Salvation Army and the reports of Victorian social reformers confirm every grim detail. This was the golden age of the British Empire, where London was the wealthiest city on earth, yet its workforce was sleeping in boxes or hanging from ropes like carcasses in a butcher shop. The contrast between the silk-lined beds of Mayfair and the 4-penny coffins of Spitalfields was a chasm that defined the era. The psychological toll of this miserable sleep was profound. Constant sleep deprivation led to Victorian brain fog, making workers prone to horrific industrial accidents, which in turn fueled the cycle of poverty. You couldn't get a better job because you were too tired to function, and you were too tired to function because you couldn't afford a real bed. It was a closed loop of human degradation. Some historians suggest that these conditions were a deliberate tool of social control.
A man who spends his night hanging over a rope doesn't have the energy to start a revolution. He only has the energy to survive until the next rope is tied. The ritual of the 2-penny hangover stripped away the last shred of human dignity, reducing the person to a biological machine that needed just enough recharge to return to the factory floor.
The horror of 1880 London wasn't just the Jack the Ripper shadows or the thick fog. It was the fact that for a significant portion of the population, the most vulnerable state of human existence, sleep, had been turned into a mechanical, profit-driven nightmare. They lived in a world where even the floor wasn't free. You paid to sit, you paid to hang, or you paid to lie in a box. When the sun finally rose over the Thames, these sleepers would stumble back out into the gray light, their bodies aching from the rope or the hard wood of the coffin box. They didn't wake up refreshed. They woke up survived. The miserable sleep wasn't a choice. It was the only thing standing between them and the freezing grip of a London gutter. Today, we value our 8 hours as a health requirement. In 1880, sleep was a luxury that the poor bought in installments of pain.
It is a reminder that the progress of civilization isn't measured by the height of its monuments, but by how it treats a tired human being at 3 in the morning. In the greatest city in the world, the answer was a rope, a box, and a cold floor. The two-penny hangover eventually faded as housing reforms took hold, but the memory remains as a testament to a time when London was the most expensive place in the world to be poor. It wasn't the ghosts that haunted the London nights. It was the thousands of living men and women hanging in the dark, waiting for the rope to fall.